guys, I want to help you move and feel better. If you're dealing with back and knee pain, today's 2-minute video is going to be vital for you. We're going to be going over one of the most commonly misconstrued concepts of human movement, and that's hip extension. Like I said, if you're dealing with back and knee pain, there's a good chance that you're limited in your ability to extend your hips fully. Hip extension is vital for pushing yourself forward. So is back extension. So if you don't have enough of the hip extension movement, you're going to get more from your back. If you get more from your back, that's also going to push your pelvis forward and down, and that's going to leverage the front of your knees. So if you're getting that patellar pain, or if you're getting that low back muscle soreness with everything that you do, listen to what we got to say today. The first thing I want to mention is that hip extension is pretty tough to test for. If you try to test for it with someone laying on their stomach, picking up their leg behind them, that hip extension becomes back extension pretty quick, and that's going to mask a limitation. The same thing can happen pretty much if you lay on your back and try to drop your leg off into hip extension. If you have an anterior hip capsule laxity, it'll look like your leg goes all the way, but in reality, your pelvis isn't moving, just the femur is sliding around in the socket. Both are not great tests for hip extension. So, the test that is, we're not going to go over today because it takes 2 people to do, but what we are going to do is talk about a few concepts that are going to help you to improve it with your everyday training regimen. The first thing I want you to understand is what makes hip extension happen. So in red, we're going to draw the muscles that make your hip extend. The most common one, that one that everyone loves to talk about, is your glutes. It pulls from the back side of your pelvis down to the back of your leg. It pulls your pelvis this way, but it also pulls your leg this way. So when we think about hip extension, we often think about the leg going behind us. But it's just important to recognize that your pelvis rotating back is also hip extension. Another muscle that does that is your hamstrings. It attaches a little bit lower and pulls down to the back of the knee and to the back of the thigh. Same thing as the glutes. It's going to rotate that pelvis back and pull your leg behind you. So it goes both ways. The last thing that makes hip extension happen is your abdominals. So your abdominals connect on the front side of your pelvis and pull up to your rib cage. Because they pull that pelvis in the same direction as your glutes and hamstrings, they all contribute to hip extension. So, when setting up for deadlifts, single leg bridges, glute bridges, all of that kind of stuff, it is vital to know where your pelvis is. And that's what we're going to take a look at in the next couple videos. Let's look at the deadlift. The deadlift is a great exercise for training hip extension, but only if done properly. With this first form, if you notice my low back, you'll see my shirt wrinkle up. This indicates that I'm using back extension rather than full hip extension to raise the bar. With this second form, I'm going to actively tuck my tailbone underneath me, extend my pelvis over my legs, and go down from there. This allows for a much stronger deadlift. I'm able to keep my glutes, hamstrings, and abs engaged. As I come up to the top, I pull my tailbone all the way through and fully engage my glutes, hamstrings, and abs. That is how you train hip extension with the deadlift. Here we have the glute bridge or hip thrust. It's not as easy to see the composition due to my shirt, but if you watch my belly, you will see it round up towards the sky, indicating that I'm using back extension over hip extension. The first cue people tend to use to address this is lock the rib cage down. Even with my abs engaged, as I go up, I still feel my back extending, and I'm trading back extension for hip extension. The cue or the technique I would use to address this would be to tuck the tailbone underneath us, pull the front of the pelvis up and the rib cage down, lock those 2 bones together, and then go up into the bridge. You will feel a much stronger glute and hamstring contraction, and you will train hip extension.